Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome. Welcome also to those joining us online today. One of our panelists is also joining us online late at night in California. Welcome, Bunde Adecore. I also have on the panel with me Bertrand Piccard, a man whose reputation precedes him, I think, famous for flying around the world solo twice. We have Professor Hesham Al-Aksari, the Deputy President of the Egyptian Space Agency, and Matthias Rauch, who is Head of Technology Transfer at the Fraunhofer Institute in Germany, Germany's premier research and technology organization. I am Matthew King. I'm from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, and it's my great pleasure to be moderating this session today. I would first of all like maybe just to introduce the session just by letting everybody know what it is we're here for. So this session is about technology transfer, which is a sort of jargon for trying to explain how we can move ideas and new technologies around the green transition to the market. How can we really make a reality of climate neutrality? And for this, we know we need to deploy new technologies at scale, not just in the developed world, but in the developing world as well. And I think this is a really important topic for discussion today, Solutions Day at COP. So we hope to be discussing some solutions. I saw yesterday, when I visited the conference, a rather interesting factoid on the wall of the conference area of IRENA, the UN Agency for Renewable Energies. Only 2% of global investment in renewable technologies takes place in Africa. That's a pretty sad number, I think. So we want to think about what technologies are available, how we can scale them up quickly, what are the bottlenecks, and how can the ideas be transformed into reality. So, Bertrand, maybe I could turn to you first. You have a great story to tell us, I think, about how you came to think about 1,000 solutions for profitable environmental benefit. Can you tell us something about that?
Yes, good morning to everyone. On the one hand, I'm an explorer, and the flight around the world with Solar Impulse was a demonstration, but symbolic demonstration, that clean technologies and renewable energies can achieve incredible and impossible things like flying with no fuel, no pollution. But on the other hand, I'm also a psychiatrist. And I always learn that we have to adapt to the language of the people we want to convince. And the language of the key decision makers in our world is the language of profit and job creation, which means that if we come to the negotiations, like here in the COP27, and we say we have to protect the environment, we are not heard. But if we come and we say there are solutions that are economically profitable, that allow to create jobs, that are a financial advantage for the country, and they also protect the environment, there is much bigger chance to be heard. And this is why we launched this challenge of identifying more than 1,000 of these solutions. And it's exactly what we managed to do. Now we are at 1,450 solutions, systems, product, material, devices that can protect the environment in the field of water, energy, mobility, construction, industry, agriculture, circular economy, waste management. All this is available. And I wanted to show that it was not something that was highly technological for the future, but something existing today, but that is not well known and not well implemented.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. We also hear this, that actually businesses are not interested in technology. They're interested, as you say, in profit and jobs. And I guess, Matthias, this is something in your role at Fraunhofer, where you actually have a research organization that creates and develops new intellectual property, new ideas. It's your role to get these ideas out to the market. So is this an issue that you face as well?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. Yes, that's actually what we do. We at Fraunhofer, as many colleagues in other research and technology organizations, are the problem solvers. So businesses, they usually can't afford, unless they're the huge global players, to have their own massive research and development centers. So particularly for the small and medium-sized enterprises, they would turn to us and would ask for collaborative projects for contract research that would either improve their way to work internally or to improve their products. And over the last, let's say, almost 2 decades, we've seen a massive increase in the requests for sustainable technologies, but also for environmentally friendly technologies. But not because solely they're environmentally friendly, but for 2 reasons. And the first is, of course, the regulator more and more demands that they implement such technologies. But the second is you can actually earn money with those technologies. And that's something, and I couldn't agree more, that really drives those businesses towards environmentally friendly and sustainable production and services. And we really provide the necessary know-how and equipment also in labs to allow for those technologies to mature, to scale up, and to be implemented either in the internal production system or as viable products in the market.
Interesting. Maybe this is a good moment to bring in Bunmi from California. Bunmi, you're working for the Bill Gates Ventures Foundation, Breakthrough Energy Ventures. Can you tell us also something about the work of that foundation and the sort of technologies or new businesses that you're looking at in particular and supporting?
Thank you. So first, Breakthrough Energy Ventures is somewhat different from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. We are under a new umbrella, the Breakthrough Energy umbrella, and we are for-profit investors in early-stage technologies. To support Bertrand's point, we believe that there is a real intersection between impact and profitability. In order for impact to be sustainable, it has to be profitable. And the role of innovation is really in creating those profits for the marketplace. At Breakthrough Energy Ventures, we support technologies, enterprises that provide technologies to mitigate carbon emissions. Most of our companies have a target to solve problems that mitigate about 500 million tons of CO2 per annum at scale. We think of those companies really from solving a market inefficiency perspective, because that is ultimately how companies get paid. When you solve market inefficiency, people ought and want to pay for the product that you provide. We invest across about 5 different verticals. We look at opportunities in manufacturing, in food and ag, in buildings, in electricity, in transportation, and in general, we are early stage investors where we generally will invest in a Series A, Series B profile of startup companies. Most of our companies have been in the United States and in Europe. We do have a few companies that we've supported in emerging economies, particularly in Africa and in Latin America.
Very interesting. So I was thinking now maybe Hesham, we could hear from you a first go. In Europe, which is the place I know best, we have incredible political resistance, especially today with a cost of living crisis, rising inflation, about maintaining a commitment towards carbon neutrality by 2050, which is already a date quite far in the future. I can only begin to imagine what this debate must be like in Egypt and other parts of Africa. Can you say something about how you're trying to develop renewable energy technologies in order to decarbonize the economy in Egypt?
Oh, that's actually a very good question, which can let me also share with you that I also feel for him in California. I just moved from California 3 months ago. I'm a scientist, Earth observation scientist, using satellite observations and using different kind of technologies in order to address sustainable development goals. So to try to unleash the potential of Earth observations and satellite technologies that can help developing marketable products, things which can be used in order to bring revenue, to bring income for the people. And I totally agree with you that there is also the same kind of political resistance, if not even the local resistance about carbon neutrality, because they don't see the benefit of doing that. And this is where we come as scientists or as people working with technologists, how you can close that value chain, how you can really show what kind of products can be developed, using, for instance, Earth observations or satellite technologies, which can have products that can be marketable, that can be sustainable, that can address very, very specific needs for the people. A case study that we did a few years back via a project that was funded by through the Horizon 2020 framework, and I acted as the regional coordinator on a big fund which is called the GeoCradle. We used that fund in order to develop the first dynamical solar atlas of Egypt. And that solar atlas became a case study in the country, and now is considered to be the official document used by the government and by the Ministry of Electricity and Renewable Energy for any kind of solar investment in the market. Satellite technologies were used, forecasting models, Copernicus radiative transfer or Copernicus aerosol services radiative transfer models in order to assess how much aerosols would affect your incoming solar irradiance. You calculate actual irradiance on the ground, you give them the products so that they can build a successful business model on different kind of solar plants. So that was really a good case of implementation, how you can use technologies, how you can use science in order to address very specific needs and to show the value of having such a product, such an output in investment plans.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting, yes. I mean, I think this trying to discover and show the resources available, be it in the ocean for sort of tidal technologies, for wind, understanding the resources available for creating new energies is really important for developing these business models. And I was thinking maybe, first thing I should say, excuse me, there are questions that you can ask, both those watching online or those here in the room on Slido. So please use the QR code if you want to ask a question to any of the panelists, and they'll appear here on the screens, and then we can ask them. But maybe if I just turn again to you, Bertrand. So you've moved up from 1,000 to 1,450 ideas. That's very impressive. Are you involved in any way in trying to move some of these ideas to market or showcasing these ideas, or do you think you have a role in that to play?
I want to emphasize that they are not only ideas, because this is sometimes a big handicap when we speak about fighting climate change, is all the people who say we have ideas, but what we have identified are real solutions coming from listed companies or from startups or medium-sized companies, but they all exist. They are very, very practical, and they're all on the market or absolutely ready to go on the market. So what do? We have them going through our experts. We have 370 independent experts who assess these solutions. And then we give, if it is passed, we give the label, Solar Impulse Efficient Solution label. And these labels allows them to have better contact with investors, better contact with clients, better contact with governments. And what we do is really to promote them, maybe not always individually because there are too many, but promote the fact that there are so many solutions. And this is one way to unlock the type of endless discussions in the climate conferences. where people say we have to be carbon neutral in 2050, but they don't know how to get there.
Yeah.
So our role is to bring the toolbox
Mm-hmm.
to show how to reach the goals that the politicians have set.
Yeah. Indeed, this is showcasing is another form of showing the resources available. So solutions, sorry for the ideas, but I think this is really important, how solutions are taken up by the market. And this seems to be relatively slow because I think obviously there's a whole issue about transforming the industrial economy from fossil fuel-based to renewable-based, and there's a lot behind that in terms of existing investment. You have to make your existing investment work for your investors. So we're talking about new investment, and how do we unlock this new investment, I think is one of the major challenges. And I wondered, Matthias, whether you're a little bit on the cutting edge of new companies, new technologies moving to market. Where do you see the bottlenecks, not just from the Fraunhofer perspective, but maybe in Germany or Western Europe?
Well, I'd say from a broader perspective taken, one of the major bottlenecks always was, still is, and remains to be the regulatory framework. Mm-hmm. I'm absolutely convinced that we need regulatory sandboxes. Mm-hmm. That we need protected areas where we can showcase the technologies developed, and with those showcases develop the suitable regulatory framework that has to come with the implementation of those new technologies. You have to get the regulation right, you have to get the global standards right in order to implement those new technologies. And we can't wait for another 2 or 3 decades to have that available. It has to come while finishing the development of the technology. And for that, we need the regulatory freedom to do so. And that is, as far as I'm concerned, one of the most pressing bottlenecks that we experience today.
Yeah, that's interesting. So a sort of conservatism both on the side of business, possibly, and the investment community, but also on the government side.
And the public authorities, exactly, okay. Yes.
But here I would like to give a shout out to the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission. We have a very large research centre in Italy, an old nuclear research site on the shores of Lago Maggiore. And there we have around 2,000 scientists working in all different fields, green and digital and new tech and you name it. And we have converted the site into a living lab. So we are actually encouraging entrepreneurs and startups to come to the site to try out their new ideas. And we actually have some very small automatic cars driving around the site at the moment, very slowly, fortunately, so they're not a risk to personal safety. But I think this is one of the ways in which public authorities can try to encourage new ideas to be tested out in the real world. And I think we're not the only ones. There is also a whole network of living labs, and I know governments are involved in this too. And maybe, Bunmi, you could come in here and tell us something about, you're based in California, I think, so what's happening in California in terms of support on the government side or the public authorities side to some of the new technologies that you're trying to bring to market?
I'm actually based in Boston. I'm in California for work this next couple of days. I think, in the United States, there's a very strong regulatory framework for new technologies and climate. I'm sure you're very aware of the Inflation Reduction Act that was recently passed by the U.S. Congress. This really creates an enabling environment for innovation here in the United States. I think when you think about this broader topic of how we transfer technology to other parts of the world that may need that technology, I agree with your other panelists, it is important that we create that regulatory framework that enables that somewhat seamless transitioning of technologies to these marketplaces. And therein lies a significant portion of the problem. Is really identifying what technologies are actually translational to these marketplaces. This whole question of finding how technology and market inefficiencies intersect, using technology to solve very specific market inefficiencies for which people are then willing to compensate either the technology provider or indeed the technology implementer. But there is this question of creating that framework that enables the seamless transitioning of technology. So, of course, in the United States, we have enormous support. There's tremendous excitement about the role of the Inflation Reduction Act pertaining to climate technologies. We're beginning to see significant innovation in this space. It's going to create a very strong ecosystem that incentivizes both technology providers and technology adopters. We need to create very similar regulatory environments and frameworks as we think about transitioning technology to other parts of the world.
Thanks. You mentioned the word ecosystems there, and maybe we'll come back to that in a minute, but I first wanted to turn to Hesham again and ask you, bottlenecks and Egypt, or let's say the North African region, or Africa in general, what kind of particular challenges are you seeing in terms of bottlenecks, either on the government side or the investment side?
One of the major bottlenecks that I faced, in a lot of my funded projects, through the EU or through other funding agencies, is the lack of data. This is one of the most important issues that part of the world, like North Africa, usually lacks. It's very hard to get access to actual data on the ground, in different sectors, in different ecosystems, if you will. You name it, if you want to work on something in the marine environment, in the atmospheric environment, and would not. So it's very hard to get these different kind of communities to talk and to share data. So the data sharing policies needs to be revisited. That's very important for that part of the world. Even when we run our climate models, you are aware of that in Europe. You always have this area which is lacking some kind of ground validation. When you want to establish some kind of ground networks in order to measure, to assess, it's also quite hard. And probably, I still consider myself as a scientist. I just became a government official, 3 months ago, being in the position of vice president of the Egyptian Space Agency for space programs. I still consider myself as a scientist, and that was one of the major issues that I always had to face. And probably, we are not doing a very good job as scientists in communicating what science can do, what new ideas can do, and how it can really make a difference, how it can make a phase shift, in what we are trying to achieve, carbon neutrality, addressing other ecosystems, when it comes to vegetation, when it comes to food security, when it comes to water resources management, all of these different areas which are very hot topics. There are existing technologies which can really help, can really support, can really make decision makers to be better informed in a way of how to manage or how to address the problems in hand. So data sharing, I think, was among the biggest challenges that I faced in that part of the world, as well as to apply some of the key studies, to apply some of the existing technologies. I think we still need to work in that direction a little bit to have better crowd, or to have better belief in those approaches.
Okay. So this data issue, I think, is a really valuable one as well. I mean, we have major efforts underway in Europe to create wide open data spaces in all kind of areas that people will be able to find, store, process data. But of course, most of Europe's research effort is happening inside the European Union, yeah? And we're not so good at sort of either gathering data that may be useful in Africa, because you're interested in resources that may be valuable for you. Is this something you would like to see more of?
That's definitely what I really want to see, and I would really commend the ARC and the EU for for this kind of support and this kind of direction, because the southern basin, the Mediterranean basin, is very, very important. North Africa and that part of the world is quite important for Europe for the long term, in terms of investment, in terms of climate-related issues which might be happening in the near future. So definitely, this is something that needs to be done. Actually, one of our projects that I mentioned before, part of the delivery system was a regional data hub. We wanted to lead by example. We wanted to use all the scientific work that we did, all the scientific data sets that we were able to create, all the resources, all the solutions, to have a kind of a decision support system or a region data hub where data can be shared, can be accessed by others, and can be utilized for the better good. So definitely, this is something that needs to be looked at deeply on the EU side.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, that was one of the first questions that we have here: is what more can the EU do? Yeah, here we are hosting a discussion panel on this, but the question I think comes to us is, what can the EU do more? So maybe, Bertrand, do you have any ideas as to what we should do more and better of in terms of support for developing and rolling out new technologies?
I think we should reframe a little bit the context of technology transfer, because technology transfer very often is used as an alibi to do nothing. We say that the bad northern countries have a lot of technologies that they don't want to share with the good countries of the south, and then everybody argues, and we're in the discussions instead of being in the implementation. I think for very high technology, yes, there is a question of technology transfer. When we're speaking about satellite and this type of things that need high research. But most of the solutions to fight climate change are not very high tech. Sometimes they are common sense. It's another way to use what already exists.
Yeah.
New materials, to insulate buildings. It's not high tech. You have bio-based products made from grass that can insulate a building better than plastic things.
Yeah.
So what I believe is that we have to include all these solutions into international trade.
Oh, yeah.
Countries can buy, or we have investors that allow countries to buy these things. Or what is also something that I highly recommend is to delocalize some of the production of these solutions from the north to the south in order to allow the countries of the south to produce, maybe under license or I don't know what type of agreement, all these products that are good for them, which is sometimes much cheaper to produce on site than to transport from the north to the south.
Yeah.
So it's more a question of trading agreements than the question of technology transfer for, I would say, 99% of the solutions.
That's very interesting. Okay, so we can think about how we use our trade power in order to encourage development of new solutions inside our trading arrangements with other countries. We also finance a lot. I mean, a lot of research, but a lot of our other external finance tends to be for supporting individual projects. Yeah, maybe to support health or education in developing countries. Maybe we should think about ways in which we can support the development of indigenous industrial production in less developed countries. Matthias?
Well, there is a way, and that's called collaborative research, competitive research. That's not for a single benefiter, but that's for the benefit of whole industry sectors and communities. And that's what we've done over a couple of decades in the European Research Framework Program, which is now in decline because more and more we tend to fund those single beneficiary programs now.
Yeah.
So I'd really like to focus on those collaborative projects, and then of course include international partners, as you do. But I would recommend to really strengthen that line of European financing.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Well, we need, of course, to first of all, I suppose, build some of these industries at scale in the northern part of the world, in order to be able to encourage development in the southern part of the world as well. And some of these don't exist yet, so that takes a lot of public financing and efforts as well. So. Again, on the regulatory government side, to think about slightly more dynamic approaches to this. I wanted to come, if I could now, as we're about halfway through the session, to this issue of ecosystems. And Hesham, we did a study about innovation ecosystems in countries in Central Eastern Europe and the North African Mediterranean basin. And we looked also a couple of years ago at how innovation was working in Egypt. And I'm afraid the results, were not altogether positive. There were some issues about how supportive government agencies were to the startup sector. What do you think is needed in Egypt or Northern Africa to support this kind of creative ecosystem of smaller companies that could benefit from financing?
You know what? You have to understand the dynamics of that part of the world is different from the western part, from Europe as well. People needs to be better educated. Needs to understand this kind of entrepreneurial world. This kind of startups, the ideas of innovative ideas or having those kind of accelerators or having startups which can be housed in places. So all of this kind of mentality is getting there, it's getting in the community. This kind of ecosystem that needs to be created between academic sectors and the government and the financing and funding agencies. This kind of ecosystem needs to be created so that you can have value added products which can be again marketable, sellable, sustainable. All of this is very, very important. And I think recently I have to say, even at the agency, we just started an accelerator, and we have a few projects that were funded, 10 days ago. And we are moving in this direction. So we are getting there where we can have, where we can adopt some ideas which are kind of promising, and we see the value and we see how they can be quite beneficial. It's a matter of time, I think. And I think after the COP, and what we are observing in terms of finance, in terms of a lot of partnerships which are being built between North Africa, between Egypt and other nations, I think there will be a change in the mentality or change in how things are running in the operation itself, to have a better ecosystem for those ideas, for joint ventures, for startups, for accelerators, where you can really have innovative ideas coming to place and coming to the market to deliver some products which can be of use.
Well, it's very encouraging to hear maybe a change in approach or mentality happening. And I think this ultimately what we're talking about when we reach carbon neutrality is a massive societal and cultural change. Yeah. So I think that's really encouraging to hear that's happening. Maybe, Bulmi, if we could turn to you. Ecosystems for developing new ideas and new companies that thrive quickly, dare I say it, Netflix, Tesla, Google, these were just microscopic things a little while ago, and now they're world beaters. So you can move quite quickly if you have the right ingredients in place, from very small to transformative. Yeah, I mean, what sort of what are the elements you think you see in the US that maybe other countries, even Europe, don't have to that extent, that are important in driving this transformation?
Well, I think the US has done technical innovation and the startup revolution quite successfully, and I think there are elements of it that are transferable to other places in Europe, in North Africa, and elsewhere around the world. The key thing is finding technologies that solve local market problems. There's this whole thesis around the localization of technology. Technology must solve problems within local societies. And so you need technical innovators that want to innovate in that regard. And sometimes that innovation is not just necessarily a technology innovation, it is sometimes also a business innovation, the implementation of existing technologies to solve some of these challenges. So on the one hand, you need the sponsor of the innovation. But besides the sponsor, you need the capital markets in the ecosystem. You need people that are willing to take at-risk capital and put that to work to prove either early failure or early success. Those are both ingredients of how you accelerate things to the marketplace. And then, of course, as we discussed at large, you need the appropriate, conducive environment as facilitated by the regulatory framework. These three elements are absolutely necessary to accelerate the adoption of technology into the marketplace. The innovation sponsor, whether that is a business innovation or a technical innovation, the capital markets that are willing to take, the right amount of risk-adjusted profiling of companies, and of course, you need a regulatory framework. Pertaining to the capital markets, as you move to variety of macroeconomic challenges, whether that be currency volatility, the ease of loaning, providing debt, and so on. There are various elements of capital that will become relevant to those markets. Concessional capital in some cases, and then layered on top of that the kind of instruments that we work with in the venture community. But these three components of the ecosystem are absolutely relevant. We need to see more capital flowing in the direction of risk and the willingness of that capital to take the kind of risk profiles that accelerate technology and indeed business innovation development.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I mean, that last point about sort of risk appetite of investors, I think is a really interesting one. And famously, in the US, there is a lot more risk appetite. I mean, if we look at somewhere like Germany and the ecosystem there, Matthias, Germany is not short of money for investment in new technologies, and famously has quite a forward-looking economy, a powerful economy, but nevertheless, not able to develop the kind of new companies with new technologies for the market in the same way as the US. And why do you think that is? Is this a cultural phenomenon?
It certainly is a cultural phenomenon, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I'd also say we've come quite a bit of the way over the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. So I think the investment performance in new technologies is now much better than it used to be. Mm-hmm. In France, in Germany, in many of the bigger economies in Europe. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely not short of money. It might still be a cultural thing that we are more risk-averse than some other investors in some other markets. Mm-hmm. But still, we also talk about a different set of technologies because usually what European companies do best is what we call deep tech. Mm-hmm. That's not writing the next app for the digital global economy, but it's really heavy industry. That's where the strength lies in Europe and particularly in Germany. Mm-hmm. And there you have longer innovation cycles. And you have longer investment cycles, so that's a huge difference that should be taken into consideration when comparing the situation in the US to the European industries. Mm-hmm. I'd say the investment in young companies is just another way of tech transfer, of course. But I'd also like the investment in brains to be considered as a way of tech transfer, and that's where we are certainly excellent in Europe. We educate and train people very well, and then particularly, of course, in universities and in public institutions, but also in research and technology organizations, and then they take that knowledge with them when they go to the industrial sectors and work there and employ their knowledge there. And that's, I think, integrating courses at university, but also in our organizations and trainings about how to start companies and how to be more entrepreneurial is certainly one way to improve the situation even more.
I think the education side of it is we haven't discussed yet, and that's really important. But I wanted to come to you, Bertrand, because there's a question for you here. And in fact, the two questions we have are rather similar, and they're about transfers from north to south. Is it and how north to south? I use that in a very sort of shorthand way, from the developed to the developing worlds. What are the issues that you see there, or how could we help, or what sort of ideas would you have, suggestions?
I like this question from Atik Zaman, who is saying
on the plastic
that
pollution.
in Bangladesh, someone has invented a cellulose-based polymer that can avoid the plastic pollution. So we see that there is not a monopoly of inventors in the north. You have inventors everywhere, and we have to value that. So our role with the Solar Impulse Foundation, to answer that specific question, is that we can assess this solution with our experts. If all the criteria are met, we can give the label, and we can promote this solution amongst the companies in the north who are desperate to have replacement of plastic. When you see the recent study that has shown that the three most polluting companies in terms of plastic are Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola, and Nestle, I tell you they would love to have a solution like that if it really works. Now, for the other question about IP transfer and things like that, there are several different situations we have to examine. One are the solutions that protect the environment, which are not profitable. This is difficult to find investments. In this case, it's more donations, it's philanthropia, it's NGO money, it's money that is just spent in order to protect the environment, but no hope of return. Now, most of the solutions and all the ones we have identified are economically profitable, which means that it's much easier to get the investment because it's an investment. If you introduce a solar dryer for the farmers in a country where half of the harvest is destroyed by moisture, then it's directly profitable. And you have a payback that is possible to buy the thing. Then afterward, you can always negotiate, because there are international commercial rules, negotiate to have a licensing right and make it in another country. For renewable energies, it's exactly the same. Look how the countries get poorer and poorer every year by spending foreign currencies, that means dollars, to import fossil fuels. It's money that is lost. At the end, you don't have the money anymore, you don't have the fuel anymore. But if you invest into solar power, wind power, small hydro for river, biomass production, then you can delocalize the production of energy, you can develop a local economy, create jobs, make people richer, and pay back for the investment. And then here again, you can try to develop it also on the local basis. So you see, it's not a question of the rich helping the poor, it's a question of human beings on this planet who have to collaborate with logical rules, fair for each side, but also fair for the environment. And all the solutions exist, and now we really have to implement them. And Matthias was very right when he was saying that one of the major bottleneck is not the IP, it is not the money, it is the legal framework. Because as long as it is allowed everywhere to pollute and to be inefficient, people will pollute and be inefficient, and they will say we follow the rules. But in all the countries, north and south, east and west, if you have standards, if you have norms that push the economy and the industry and the population to be efficient in terms of food production, resources, water, waste management, energy, and so on, then all these technologies will be just pulled to the market. And also in the south, they will be pulled because there will be a need. People will understand that if they want to develop their country, get richer, and create jobs, these solutions are absolutely mandatory, because what is making the people poorer and poorer is the inefficiency of what they use and what they produce.
Well, fortunately, that has now been captured on film for all eternity, Bertrand. So I think we'll replay that. This legal requirements, legal framework is really important that all countries can do that. Very difficult, however, often to mobilize sufficient lawmakers in number to push for such regulations. I think scientists have a role in holding the mirror up and showing what is necessary and needed. But we also have to, I think, encourage the governments that we speak to really think about investing their currency reserves in a new way to support the development of an industrial transformation and setting a legal framework that drives this and encourages this. I think that's very true. I wanted to come to the issue again of skills and people. Yeah, I think it's one of the issues mentioned in the questions that we have here. What happens in Western Europe and the US is that there tends to be a very efficient system of finding and discovering talent and bringing them from developing countries and other countries and bringing them to the US and Europe to study at university, to develop their knowledge, and often they stay. Is their mechanism working sufficiently well that trained and talented individuals can return and have the support to do so? What's your experience of this session?
I have to be very political about answering this question. It's right, like it's the right question to ask somebody like me. I've been in California. I've been in the U.S. since 1999. So I just moved to Egypt 3 months ago, and I still hold my position as a professor at my university. It is not easy, to be honest with you. I have to applaud the effort of the government, in talent acquisitions. They try their absolute best in order to get, their talented people who can help, who can contribute one way or another back to their country so that they can, contribute and help. But it is not necessarily they have the right mechanism of doing so to keep those talents from seeking other opportunities. And this is what we need to work on. This is the kind of stuff that needs to be addressed, needs to be looked at deeply, because you have to understand that you are not competing at a local level. There is a global competition, and there is a market that everybody is open to. This is very important, and in this part of the world, it is not yet looked at as something of that high importance. There are a lot of things, but this is understandable, because when you come to North Africa, for instance, or Africa in general, there are a lot of issues that needs to be looked at, and maybe looking into a fair market analysis of those talents is not the top of the priority for the moment. But in my opinion, that's the most important thing, because with these kind of minds, you are gonna go places. I just want to comment on the IP as well, and on solutions that not necessarily bringing revenue. I cannot agree more with you. Coming from academia, coming from colleges where we develop science programs, and everywhere physics programs are not profitable. But you cannot have a respectable or a reputable college of science without a physics program. So the universities, this is what they do. They always invest in physics programs. They try to acquire the most, the biggest talents, the most amazing professors to teach in their programs, and the programs are not occupied by more than 5, 6, 10 students like in physics programs. So it is a burden on universities. But again, you cannot survive or you cannot have a successful college without, or a science program without physics. So I cannot agree more with you. Like, there are some solutions that we need to be looked at from the government perspective, that this is the way to go. Although, it's not going to be bringing us a lot of revenue, but they are very important. So your point is like right on.
Okay. So there are some structural issues. We're coming in now into the last 10 minutes, so maybe it's time for sort of wrap-up statements. So, Matthias, is there anything that you would have wanted to say or contribute that you didn't have a chance to do so yet?
Well, I think I made the point with the most important bottlenecks and the regulatory framework. But what I would like to do additionally is to give you a positive example from my experience, how things can work out quite nicely in terms of a truly global tech transfer experience. We've set up an organization that is called WAITRO. It's the World Association of Technology and Research Organizations, that has been founded in the 1970s under the auspices of the United Nations. It's been there for, some decades. But what really made this whole thing come alive is that we came up with a digital platform that is actually designed and secured by blockchain technology, so that people, inventors, researchers, investors, but also public agencies and the wider public can meet, can exchange ideas, and can also form consortia that are pivotal, for bringing those projects that we would like to see come alive. And that is something where the internet and digital technologies really helped to increase the amount of traffic, the amount of data flow, of information flow. It's now really successful. There are a lot of projects that this platform already has created, and all of them, it's really surprising, all of them serve the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is something where I would really like to advertise this. The platform is called Saira, and it's run by WAITRO. It's all non-for-profit, and everyone who's interested in looking for consortia partners in order to do SDG-related projects, please have a look.
Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. Then, Bunmi, any last thoughts or final comments before we bring the session to a close?
Yeah, I very much agree with all of what has been said precedingly. I want to emphasize the collaborative nature of what needs to happen, particularly when you look at the previous comments around skills and capacity. For the green transition to be successful, we have to build human capacity, and that is a very collaborative endeavor between the North and the South. We have to develop technical core competencies. We have to encourage technical talent to repatriate to some of these geographies to make contributions. We have to make the capital available for that ecosystem to thrive, something that is accessible to more people. The access to capital is one of the challenges that really has to be solved for the green transition, particularly in the global south. But this question of capacity building is a very integral thesis to how we have to effect the green transition. And it's not a trivial problem, but it's something that we must begin to work more collaboratively on.
Okay, thanks very much. Then Hesham, final thought to leave the workshop with?
Creating partnerships and this kind of local investment is very, very important. Bringing people from North Africa, from Africa in general, to be working very closely with Europe is very, very important. Thinking of these different kind of programs where you can have direct impact on Africa because it will affect one way or another, directly or indirectly, Europe and the entire world. The idea of interdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity is very, very important. We cannot, it's not only like a solution that's going to come from one entity, from one sector. Building bridges, this collaboration nature, this collaborative environment is very, very needed, highly needed in Africa specifically. Creating those kind of networks where you can have access to data and create different kind of platforms that can digest data, that can create hubs for Africans and for Africa in general is very, very important because this is going to be the way forward. If you want to address these kind of challenges, you need to start thinking from a holistic approach and to have partnerships with everybody.
Super, thank you. Bertrand.
I would like to emphasize that the goal of my foundation is to help everyone to have access to all the solutions that we have identified. And one way to do that is to offer on our side the possibility for a specialist from every country, every region, every city or whoever to be trained by us for free to know how to select the solutions he needs for his country or his region. And I think this is a way that we can really support this transfer of technologies in a way, giving access to the knowledge to identify what they need. So every country is welcome to send someone to do it online, but our team will train this person and in order to be able to use the best solutions.
Thank you very much. That's a fabulously generous offer, which I hope people will take up. So I think I wanted to wrap up and say it's really interesting that we started talking about technologies and ideas and we ended up talking about how the government sector can really support partnerships, collaborations, north-south transfers, data sharing, scientific partnerships, trade relations. Have I missed something out? But I think it's really interesting that we ended up with the workshop looking at this from a totally different perspective about how the public sector can support the engagement politically and the finance sector in developing technology transfer solutions that really work for all. So with that, I would really encourage you to give a warm round of applause to such an excellent and thoughtful panel. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.